Good afternoon, everybody. Rob Veno here of SportsMemo.com and Rob Veno Sports. And as always on Thursday, I'm going to have my weekly discussion with Teddy Covers, also of SportsMemo.com and various other places around the Internet. Teddy, good Thursday afternoon.
Hey, good day to you, sir.
We are going to try and get through a few games here. I know we both have tight schedules here this afternoon, so let's see what we can cover. But a couple of things, I'm not going to go too far off the beaten path here, but I wanted to get your opinion on a couple of teams that I kind of view as unknown commodities at this point in time, and they're playing in important games this weekend for their programs. I want to start with Kansas State and West Virginia. Bill Snyder's team, we saw them in the opener against Stanford. Played Stanford pretty tough, but Stanford's a very one-dimensional football team offensively. Certainly K-State had their difficulties with the Stanford defense in that one. Since then, they've come back, played a couple of teams that they should have beat them pretty solid. I know their game was shortened to 1/2 last week. Now they're on the road at Morgantown against a West Virginia team that is averaging over 500 yards per game. Of course, that being said, they're not stopping anybody either on the defensive side of football. K-State is a squad that had a lot of trouble with spread offenses last year. I guess the biggest question here is, after watching both of these teams, do either one of them strike you as potential contenders in what's really a wide-open Big 12 this year from what we've seen?
You know, I mean, with Kansas State, we just haven't seen enough. You know, the one game where they stepped up in class, and it was the beginning of the season, and we knew that they, even with Bill Snyder's track, I mean, Bill Snyder's been so good over the years as a big underdog. There aren't a whole lot of coaches that have been better in that role than him, and actually covered the spread at the end of the game, but that had everything to do, I think, a little bit more to do with Stanford getting their first game with their young QB under their belt, as opposed to anything that Kansas State did that was impressive on the defense side of the football. And then since then, they've been real quiet, obviously. When you're not playing D1 foes, you're not going to get a whole lot of noise unless you lose one of those home games. Then everyone's going to point fingers, oh, what'd you do? So Kansas State's still something of an underdog. Come on, and obviously we've seen more of West Virginia. I don't take a lot for the Mountaineers from that point spread loss against BYU last week. Yeah, BYU ran for 280 on the ground against them. But BYU's going to do that. They've got all the, 25-year-old offensive linemen that are back from their mission. They're so big and physical in the trenches that a team like West Virginia is likely to have problems against BYU. They're older and bigger and more physical. That's not the case for Kansas State. You talked about K-State's problems defending spread offenses. And I think there is a team speed differential here that works in West Virginia's favor, certainly on the offensive side of the football. At the current price point, with the Mountaineers laying only 3.5 at home, I could only look towards the home favorite.
Yeah, and just to let listeners out there know, this point spread opens 3.5 in favor of the home team, West Virginia, and really hasn't buzzed from that number here as we speak on Thursday morning on the Pacific Coast. We see a couple of threes out there with heavier bids. Total bet up from 52.5 to 54. I find a substantial difference in my power rating, which made this game West Virginia -8, which would go along with what you were just saying, Teddy, probably West Virginia or nothing in that contest until we see a little more of this Kansas State team. Let's move to the Big Ten with a couple
Let me just jump in with one last thing on that West Virginia game real quick. I just want to say it's worth noting they only beat BYU by 3 last week. They were about to win by 10. They're at the 4-yard line. The quarterback tries to change the play. The center gets confused, snaps the ball early, bounces off the QB's knee, and boom. Instead of winning by 10, they win by 3.
Yeah, that's a tough break for those who backed West Virginia last week. Good break for those who backed BYU. I'm going to move to a Big Ten game featuring a couple of teams that aren't going to win any division, but they're a little bit intriguing to me at this point in time. I'm talking about the Purdue-Maryland game here, where Purdue it seems to have made some improvements, Teddy, especially on the offensive side where speed is concerned. They just look to be a little bit better of a football team. I know when you beat Nevada at home 24-14, that's not exactly inspiring as far as moving up the ladder in the Big Ten is concerned, or moving up in the pecking order. But for Purdue, the goal is 6-6. Let's go get to a bowl game. David Blau at quarterback seems to be efficient as a passer. They haven't had that in recent memory. I know he got picked a couple of times a couple of weeks ago, but he still seems to be a little bit better than what they've had in the past. They've got some speed at running back. But they're going to play DJ Durkin, first-year head coach, his Maryland team, which has been pretty impressive, especially on the defensive side, and they've sort of taken a new leap. This is a power rush-style team for Durkin. In this game, we see Maryland about a 10.5 point favorite. There's still a question mark on quarterback Perry Hills, who we're not quite sure if he's going to play or not. I guess my question to you would be, are they worthy of laying that type of price? Is Purdue really any better, or am I just seeing things? And does it make a huge difference whether Hill starts at quarterback or not?
Well, let's start with the Purdue side of the equation. And look, Purdue can move the football. You know, you talked about David Blau. I mean, he's moving them up and down the field. What he's not doing is avoiding the mistakes that have plagued Purdue for many years. This team hasn't. Do you remember last time Purdue was a positive turnover margin? I kind of want to look that up now because I'm sure it's been a while. Year after year, Purdue doesn't have the level of athletic defenders that create turnovers, and year after year on offense, they don't have enough playmakers to hold on to the football. So year after year, you see Purdue. They were +1 in 2011. So they have one positive turnover differential in the last 8 years. But you say, well, turnovers even out. No, they don't, especially not at the college level. The bigger, more physical teams that are more secure in their ball security, and teams that have defensive playmakers will win turnover battles year after year after year. And the teams that don't have those things, like Purdue, particularly when it comes to defensive playmakers, will not win the turnover battle year after year after year. Now, the Boilermakers didn't punt last week against Nevada, and they scored 24 points against a second-tier Mountain West defense, which tells you that this team really doesn't value possessions. That's been a problem in the Hazel era. And, of course, when we talk about the two programs and where they are, look, I mean, Maryland has been good, not great, but good, and the Durkin era is at its very beginning. There's a lot of optimism, a lot of enthusiasm for them. They're fresh. Whereas for Purdue, this will be Hazel's last year. Barring, you say 6-6. If they go 6-6 and he gets to a bowl game, it won't be. But I don't see 6 wins on their schedule unless I'm missing something. That being said, if they're going to go 6-6, this is the type of game they're supposed to win.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a goal, Teddy. It's one thing to be another thing to be able to accomplish that goal.
Sure, yeah. My goal is to hit 90% every year in every sport. Yeah.
Okay, those 6 wins might be out of reach with this. Still, the game sits at 10.5. We're looking at a total here of 56. My first inclination was to look at that game from an over standpoint. We'll see where that one goes. And let's move down to an important game in the ACC. I know everybody's talking about Clemson-Louisville, so we won't waste our time. There's been enough said on that game. But the quieter game that has some meaning is North Carolina versus Florida State. Florida State at home in Tallahassee opens up 12, down to 11. In some places we see 10.5. Total here 69, up to 69.5 or 70. From what I've seen of these two teams, Teddy, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that we could expect nothing less than an all-out offensive shootout in this contest. North Carolina's defense has been dreadful for the most part so far this season, but their offense with quarterback Mitch Trubisky taking over the reins has been very good for Florida State. I think we can say the same thing. The defense has been poor to very poor by Florida State standards. However, DeAndre Francois, quarterback, taking over the reins, has been a very pleasant surprise. You've got 2 great running backs in this one, Cook against Hood. Perimeter players all over the place. To me, this is a game where these two teams could make 69.5 look very small. I know that coaches try to make corrections to what's wrong with their teams, and both of these coaches are trying to find a way to shore up their defenses. I just don't know that there's anything they can do against the opposition here this week. What do you think?
And Florida State's defense has been, let's call it what it is, it's been a major disappointment so far. When we look at the offense, North Carolina can't stop the run, and we saw it again last week against Pitt. Dalvin Cook it should run all day against this defense, and Jacques Patrick's going to get his chances as well. And that duo, they combined for 700 plus rushing yards, both averaging better than 6 yards per carry so far this season. North Carolina's going to have a hard time stopping that, I would think. The question is whether the Tar Heels can trade points for a while here. And I'm a Trubisky fan. Heck, he cashed a ticket for me an over ticket for me last week with an incredible, game-winning drive where they converted 4th and 6, 4th and 7, 4th and 9, and scored a TD on the last play of the game. I mean, it really was a testament to digging down deep and facing adversity and overcoming adversity. Trubisky as a leader cemented his position for the Tar Heels and Larry Fedora a week ago. But I worry about their ability to move the football against the FSU. If Florida State's defense does what it's supposed to do and actually shut somebody down, the over's dead and North Carolina's dead. But you talked about the skill position talent. There's no shortage for North Carolina. If Florida State's defense continues to underachieve, we're talking about a defense that was rated as truly elite coming into the season, has gotten gashed in back-to-back weeks by some pretty good quarterbacks. But even last week against the USF, the Florida State defense isn't able to shut that offense down, and that to me is something of a concern moving forward. So I'm with you that it should be a high-scoring game, and that North Carolina could be live. But if Florida State's defense does what it's supposed to do, and what in theory they have the talent level to do, it'd be Florida State and under as opposed to North Carolina and over.
And a couple of quick notes on that contest. I think that an injury I didn't really value as much as some of the national media valued at the time in that Florida State secondary, Derwin James. I did not believe that it would be that huge of a deal. It seems like his absence has been a monster deal. Brian Switzer, Bug Howard, the wide receivers for North Carolina, likely to find some seams in that Florida State defense. But James, from a defensive standpoint, really seems to be a difference maker, and he's going to be out another 5 weeks minimum, I believe. So that's a tough loss for Florida State. We'll see if they can compensate for it. Certainly they recruit well enough. It just hasn't shown up yet. I want to move to the SEC for the last couple of games we'll cover here, Teddy. Tennessee against Georgia. We saw the monster comeback by Tennessee last week, trailing Florida 21-3. Put up 35 unanswered. It seems like Tennessee finally heard the bell and woke up for the 2016 season. I guess the biggest question here is, was that truly a wake-up call, and does that springboard them to be the team that most thought they were going to be heading into this season? Or, was it just a one-time occurrence and the problems that everybody was talking about heading into that Florida game still exist? Is the offensive line still a problem? Is the offense still a thing that will sputter, a unit that will sputter rather than be fluid and consistently move the football with Josh Dobbs and company? On the Georgia side, I think they got what I anticipated last week in that beating from Mississippi. The only question was what Mississippi's focus would be heading into that game, having lost 2 of their first 3. But having watched Georgia at Mizzou the week before and having watched Drew Lock slice and dice that Georgia defense, Kirby Smart's a defensive guru, we all know that, but his defense has been gashed incredibly the last 2 weeks. Tennessee here comes in as a 3.5 point favorite, and Georgia right now, to me, a team that looks to be truly in transition. Teddy, how do you see both of these squads right now in this game in particular?
Yeah, I'm in no rush to lay it with Tennessee here. You talked about the issues with the Vols on the offensive line, and that's a continuing concern for Tennessee. They played a couple of good second halves. I've yet to see that team play 4 quarters of good football this season, and now we're in week 5 already. So when you don't see a team putting the pedal to the metal week after week, slow starts, or and coming off as big a win as the program has had in recent memory, laying points on the road. No, I just can't do it. Not with an offensive line that's not giving Joshua Dobbs time to throw and not opening things up for the running game. I don't trust Tennessee to lay more than a field goal with them. And Georgia, remember, Kirby Smart as a defensive coordinator for Alabama. What offense couldn't they stop? Well, let's see. Remember what Clemson did against them? Remember what Ole Miss did against them the previous year? Or earlier in the year. It's his defense, for whatever reasons, they struggle against spread offenses. Tennessee doesn't run that offense. Advantage Georgia, and I think there's line value with Georgia. One team coming off a huge win, the other team coming off a huge loss. That being said, I like Jacob Eason as a young quarterback, and he's gotten his feet wet in a couple of real hostile environments, and now he gets to play between the hedges for the first time, and I think that will bode him well. But the questionable status of Nick Chubb matters to me. There aren't a lot of backs that I care about. Chubb is one of them, and unless I know that he's going to be good to go, I won't be able to get to the window backing the Bulldogs.
And if he can't go, Georgia will have to rely on Sony Michel as their featured back here. Just for noting, my power rating suggested Tennessee a 1-point favorite on the road. As we both mentioned here, they are 3.5 in some circles. Let's go to one more game here, Teddy, because I'm real interested. A lot's been talked about this week with the coach firing down at LSU. Les Miles out, Ed Orgeron in. It was surprising to hear that as soon as Ed Orgeron was named head coach, he was the guy who fired Cam Cameron, dismissed him. Steve Ensinger, now the offensive coordinator for this team, an ex-LSU quarterback way back in the day. I'm of the opinion, Teddy, that Ed Orgeron makes the move of firing Cam Cameron because he wants to take the offense in an entirely different direction. When you're interim head coach, and interim head coach as many times as Orgeron's been, you have nothing to lose at this point in time. Certainly he's a very, very long shot to be the permanent head coach of this team. But I expect to see LSU a little more wide open than what we've seen. Like I say, Orgeron's got nothing to lose. The fans want more wide open. The media down there wants more wide open. I think the receivers want more wide open style offense. Whether or not they can execute it is another story. But Danny Etling certainly has shown fairly well as a quarterback here at throwing the football. He's going to play a Missouri team whose offense is like night and day from last year. I was in the stands last week for a half, saw 58-0 left. But Drew Lock and the Josh Heupel offense, the 4 or 5 wide receiver sets, they've really taken to it this year. And then LSU hasn't seen anything like it this year. Total, open 45, bet up to 53. Is there still value in this one going over the total? And on the underdog side, is there value in Missouri plus 13?
Well, I've been reading a lot about this game. And from all the quotes that I've gotten from LSU, I've been reading the beat writers, I've been looking at the local guys, I've been trying to find anything I can for player quotes. Everybody wanted Cam Cameron fired. That's why he got fired. Orgeron knew that. And then Orgeron won the team when he did that. And, there's music in the locker room now, and the kids are dancing, and they're having fun. And this is the type of game that LSU is supposed to get some demons out. And let's not forget, defensively, in their 2 losses, LSU's allowed a grand total of 1 touchdown. 1. The offense has given up touchdowns. They're giving a bunch of field goals, but their problem's not on the defensive side of the football. Their problem's not on the offensive side of the football. And when you look at Missouri, and I know they scored 58 by halftime last week against an FCS foe, but take a look at what Missouri's done offensively on the road for the last year and a half. I believe their high point total is 11 that they scored against West Virginia. They scored 11 or 12 in that game. Against SEC competition. They scored 13 at Kentucky last year. That great Kentucky defense. Yes, I'm being facetious. Then 6 at Georgia and 3 at Vandy and 3 at Arkansas and nothing at West Virginia in the opener. So I know it's a new offense. It's also a new offense. Then you talked about how LSU's defense hasn't seen Missouri, what Missouri wants to do. Well, Missouri's offense Let's see. They faced Eastern Michigan, Georgia, Delaware State at home the last 3 weeks. LSU's a completely different animal defensively. And if there's one, again, we talk about home fields that aren't worth a lot. This home field's worth something this week. I think the crowd will be particularly raucous, and I think Missouri's walking into a hornet's nest.
And certainly a lot of that defensive, LSU's always been a good defensive team, but the hiring of Dave Aranda during the offseason made headlines and was talked about all the way up until Game 1. Somewhat his name has not been mentioned recently, but I think it needs to be, like you say, they're just not giving up touchdowns on the defensive side of the football. We'll see what changes with LSU this week and maybe what changes with Missouri this week. That'll do it for this week's analysis of the games that we find important here. We try to get you the best information we can. So you can find Teddy's work, and also you can find free plays with analysis from both of us at sportsmemo.com. Also find Teddy on Twitter at Teddy_Covers on Twitter. You can find him there. All his good work all over the place on the internet. Ted, I appreciate you taking the time with me this afternoon to get through a few games, and good luck this weekend.
Hey, pleasure's all mine. Thank you, Rob. Best of luck to you and, of course, to our entire listening audience.
That'll do it. Until next Thursday, you'll hear us again. We'll go through some more games. But for now, this is Rob Veno and Ted Savransky, a.k.a. Teddy Covers, saying good luck to everybody this weekend.
Enjoy the games and good luck.